Hello, and welcome to another episode of Virtual Legality. I'm your host, Richard Hoeg, managing member of the Hoeg Law business law firm of Northville, Michigan, and we welcome you to a very special episode of Virtual Legality. This, our fourth part of our series on my stroke and stroke recovery. Today, discussing outpatient rehabilitation and the aftermath of the whole endeavor for both me and my family, which we'll be getting to later on in this video. But as we left part three, we're here at the start of February. Hallie, who you met in part three, has graduated me twice, and I can now walk around with a narrow-based quad cane, looking something like what you might recognize here. And I can use the restroom on my own, but always with a quick hit of the call button to put me under nurse's supervision first. Mrs. Hoeg, hey Mrs. Hoeg, how you doing?
Hey there, honey.
Has, throughout this time, made sure that a family member is present at Chelsea Hospital for basically the entirety of visiting hours. So days are spent with my wife and father, with my brother taking over in the evenings to watch Seinfeld reruns, football games he definitely doesn't care about, and all the gold mining and moonshining production that Discovery Channel has to offer. By the time February 3rd rolls around, I'm ready to go, and I am more than grateful that my therapists and doctors have dropped by to send me off, along with some nurses who cheer and clap and even give me a goodie bag of therapy paraphernalia to remember them by. I get wheeled down to my waiting car and transition from wheelchair to passenger seat, just like Hallie taught me. Head down, slow, and controlled. But what seems like an ending is really more of a beginning. I enter outpatient rehab at a facility called Med Rehab at a location seemingly 50 feet from the big law firm that I used to call home. It's quite intimidating, really. Hallie becomes Danielle, Laura becomes Bethany, and with the exception of speech therapy, which basically discharges me as effectively done from moment one, things pick up where they left off, just harder and within the comforts of home. Where inpatient rehab was a kind of constant, always-on high school-type boot camp, outpatient is more like college. Classes are held twice a week, and they are just as hard or harder than Chelsea, but the bulk of the work is done at home, based on assignments given to you by your therapist. And believe me when I say, Mrs. Hoeg Law does not let me forget to do my homework. Do you, honey?
Ha! No, I did not.
Danielle, my new physical therapist, is a force and pushes me quite quickly to single cane assistance, which is where I pick up my John Hammond from Jurassic Park cane as a gift from my sister, complete with mosquito, it must be said, as I knock down my microphone here. But in very short order, I'm allowed to walk unassisted. Not to be outdone, Bethany, my OT, is also a force and has me typing and picking up tiny board game pieces with my left hand. Much like these. You might recognize these from Battleship. These pegs are not identical to what I use in occupational therapy, but they are close enough to give you an indication of the tiny things I'm now picking up with my left hand. Both wind up working my shoulder extensively as well, as it is the last muscle group that really needs the additional help. But throughout this process, I am at home. And to be honest, the transition there is arguably harder than anything I am doing or did in therapy itself, especially coming right from the hospital. That first week home is perhaps my lowest point throughout the entire process. You see, the hospitals, as much as they were frustrating to live in, were an alien environment where all I really knew was needing assistance to go from bed to chair and seeing nurses seemingly every 10 minutes. Arriving home was more of a slap in the face. Here was where I raised my daughters. Here was where we'd sit with anticipation and watch trailers for the upcoming Mario movie. And everywhere was a reminder of what I had lost. I say this not to depress or otherwise whine about my circumstance, but hopefully to illuminate what it feels like to come home, even when that's all you wanted to do so desperately while you were in the hospital. It takes some time to come to terms with that loss, and that's even when you're relatively flying through the rehab steps as I was. This was when I was closest to a depressive state.
Yeah, that was really tough. When I look back over this whole time, the hardest thing for me was watching you struggle to do things that came so easily, and that week home was really rough.
Yeah, it was. And it was unexpected. I was really excited about going home. As I said, we got a send off from the nurses. The doctors were all happy to see me leave, discharged from inpatient rehab. And you get home and you just get this full wake up call of what it is that has really happened to you in the last couple of months.
Yeah, and I wish two things. One, I wish that someone had said, mentally this might be a really big adjustment. That was never said. Like, that wasn't ever a conversation. And I wish that we had someone to call, like, in that week, in between. I mean, we're kind of in between who is responsible for you. So, like, I couldn't call your neuropsych at your old place, and we weren't really set up at your new place yet. So, but I think it would have been really helpful to have someone to call in that week and just have that conversation. So I guess I would say, if you have friends that week they're coming home from the hospital, or if this is something that's happening to a family member in your life, that's the moment they need the most care, I think, and the most help and the most support, is just to have you sit with them, because it is a, a huge struggle and a huge adjustment for everybody.
For me, I remember bounding around the house. I remember my kids jumping on me. I remember all these things that were just way too difficult to do, even with a single point cane around the house. And you had done such a great job adding grab bars everywhere and getting everything ready for my return that wasn't a problem. But it was still this kind of memory of what I used to be. And so I do think it's an issue coming home that first week. And so if you do find yourself in a circumstance like this or with any kind of trauma, and I very much hope that you don't, just know that there is a transition period that was very hard on me. And I think it's really hard on everybody, at least according to my therapist.
It was really hard to watch. The good news is that once we got you back into rehab and got you progressing again, that period didn't last very long.
Yeah, I don't think I've been in that place again throughout this process. Yeah. But the other thing that I wanted to mention here was that, especially coming directly from the hospital and the brain surgery and everything else, at this point in time, I was on anti-seizure medication and some other drugs that I would later learn were really slowing me down. I was falling asleep in chairs and really during conversations and just all over the place around the house, which causes issues all around. But my primary care physician would eventually wean me off of these. Yes, being home meant that I had a lot more than rehab appointments. Life was now full of doctor's visits, both in the form of drug follow-ups for things like my brain surgery, as well as taking care of things that should have been taken care of a long time ago, like having a responsive PCP/doctor, solving my sleep apnea, which we discussed earlier in the series, and dealing with a foot issue that I've had my whole life, which doesn't need a lot of extra description, but I have had it and it's being solved now. Speaking of my drugs, it can be quite harrowing to make the shifts that the doctor orders, always hoping for the next set to be effective while not introducing new unwanted side effects to your day. So this whole period of time, we're starting up a new rehab clinic. We're using new therapists that I don't recognize. We're going through harder and harder stuff. I'm on drugs that are changing. I'm sleeping all the time. I'm a little bit sad about my circumstances at home. And everybody in and around my life is having to deal with that. And hopefully I wasn't too much of a bear.
Oh, are you waiting for me to say no, you weren't?
Oh, no, you don't have to. You don't have to jump in to say, like, no, you were great the whole time.
No,
I don't think I was.
I think you did the very best that you could. I really do. And you just you never quit. I mean, that's really the biggest thing, is you never quit. So that's really all I ask is, it's going to be hard and it's going to be sad and it's going to be difficult and there's going to be a lot of emotions, but you never quit.
Well, people give me a lot of credit for being positive and upbeat about this whole thing, and I try my best, but certainly it's not every day and it's not every moment, and you bear the brunt of that. Further, since I'm not allowed to drive until I'm cleared by therapy, everything on this list, organizing doctor's visits, doctor's follows up, drug shifts, blood draws, rehab appointments, everything fell on you. How did you organize all this? What does your day look like? And how do you drive me around all over the place?
Yeah, it's a mess. Let's just be honest about it. It's a mess. It's hard to manage. I bought a brand new planner, and that, makes things better because at least you have something nice and pretty to open and write in. But yeah, there's a lot. But I do really enjoy driving around with you because, like when I drive the kids to school, there's no other distractions, right? So it's just you and me, and we can have deep conversations or funny conversations or whatever we want to get into, but I'm not being pulled away to do a kid thing or to go make dinner. You're not being pulled away to do a work thing or to visit with some family or whoever's here. And so it's just you and me. And that at least is kind of a big blessing.
Well, it's very nice of you to say. I hope I don't get too much of my whining out and you have to deal with it on those drives, but I know I do some.
No, you're great. It's great being with you.
As for another aspect of our lives now, we're watching my sodium intake and taking my blood pressure at every meal. So in addition to organizing, driving, and parenting, you're also asked to learn a whole new style of effectively saltless cooking while dealing with what I'm sure is a cranky, post-rehab, tired husband. How do you do it?
I have no idea. I don't know how to answer that question. It's like, this is what we do, right? Like, we got kids, they need stuff. You need stuff. This is what we do. This is what I signed up for, I guess, when I married you. This is it.
But
Now,
you've
what
come
you're
up with
not
a lot
telling
of new
people,
cooking styles that have worked really well over the course of
yeah.
the past couple of
Well,
months.
what
You
you're
don't
not
have
telling people is that I'm a terrible cook. And I have been for our entire marriage. And so this has been one of my challenges is I had to step up my game. But, I think I'm doing a pretty good job right now.
You are. I'm trying to give you credit for this.
Yeah.
You are not accepting it.
No, I bought a bunch of cookbooks and, had to kind of figure out what cooking was going to look like for me. And it's different for everyone. Right. And that's like the big, I don't know, my big takeaway is just you have to adapt. Got to figure out what's going to work for you, and it might be unconventional and it might be not a traditional way of doing things, but if it gets the job done, it doesn't matter as long as the things that need to be taken care of are being taken care of.
And if you're anything like me, who likes things the way he likes them and likes to be on patterns, it's a very uncomfortable period of time as well. That's part of the aftermath here, definitely. But that's where we are now. I have a wonderful new doctor. I sleep better than ever. My foot condition is being taken care of. My blood pressure is under control, and I haven't had a headache this year. It may sound silly, but I can honestly say I feel truly blessed in some important ways, and I'm hopeful I can lead a life even better than it would have been thanks to the efforts, well wishes, and prayers of so many. It's one of the reasons I so wanted to do the big finale fundraiser we've set up for the 6th, which I'll hopefully be able to bring up on the screen right now so you can see it. If you haven't seen it, we've got a placeholder set up to start at 10 a.m. Eastern on the 6th. We have descriptions of the recipient hospitals that are going to be getting donations as part of this fundraiser. And I hope you do check it out because I think we're going to have a lot of fun. There's going to be a lot of friends. And I think it's going to be worth your time. It's for a good cause. And I couldn't be more enthused about what we're doing this Saturday. Are you going to be there, honey?
I will definitely be there. We are so excited about this, and our contacts at the hospital are so excited about this, and it's going to be fun. I know some of the people who are coming, so guaranteed to be full of laughs and guaranteed to be entertaining, but also just
for the record, these are not legal guarantees. We do not make guarantees on this channel of laughs or entertainment.
Sure. Things can happen. I get you. Okay. There's Rick Hoeg, never giving an absolute. But we are so excited to be helping these hospitals in such a concrete way that will really, really help patients and patient outcomes. And it's going to be really great. So I hope that we will see everyone there on Saturday.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Now let's look at the last set of community questions for the series. What has been the most rewarding activity during your therapy, rehabilitation, and healing? What's been most rewarding? I've had wonderful talks with my wife, parents, and children, some of which you've heard about already from Mrs. Hoeg Law, all from a new perspective of just being grateful for all that I have. I've talked about the community as well already, but you've been so amazing in keeping my spirits up and focused on the horizon in front rather than the path behind. It's so easy to get lost in remembering what was lost and trying to get back all that you've lost, but you guys have been so great at keeping me moving forward, as has my wife, as has my kids, as has everybody that's been involved in what seemingly is an army of people helping me move forward. So thank you so much for that. Next question, since I never know when I might have to help someone in a similar case, what did you find most helpful, which would be non-obvious from those helping you? I think the most important thing to be helpful is simply being there, even if you don't think you are doing much of anything. That's what I think is non-obvious about it. From talks with my wife and others, I think people think, well, if I'm just sitting here, if I'm not doing anything, I'm not being helpful, I'm just taking up space. That isn't the case. It's very helpful emotionally and psychologically. Certainly, it also helps if you're Mrs. Hoeg to be organizing and willing to ask questions of the medical professionals, as I know that I didn't feel equipped to take on that role myself, given the circumstances. So those are things that you can do, but most importantly is just being there. And I thank my wife profusely as much as I can for doing that for me for the past few months.
Oh, honey, of course. I mean, I would like to thank your community because they were there for all of us. And that really helped keep me going so that I could do, I could perform my role in this healing process. So it's definitely a community effort for sure.
What have you learned about life priorities, yourself, your family, the medical world experience, etc. since, and has it changed your approach to life? What I would say to this is that the whole thing has definitely changed my perspective. One of the things that jumps out at me is just how pointless things like the news seemed laying in the hospital bed in January, and to some extent even now. I know how close I came to not being around for any of it, and I regularly am just so darn happy to be here to see it all. So that did definitely change my perspective. Second question, a little bit less deep, but still very important. Have any of your rehab instructors told you to play any video games as part of your therapy? Yes. As a matter of fact, I've done a bunch of therapy with a Wii controller, and I also was just assigned Beat Saber, a VR game to play, as a matter of fact. So, yes, my therapists are trying to meet me where I live and assign me things that I like to do and want to do and that my brain wants to learn to do in order to get me further and further in my therapy. So definitely video games have been a part of that. And how many rules have been placed upon you have you broken or feel that you will break in the future? This is a funny one because I'm not really a rule breaker by nature, which I think sometimes surprises my therapists. Our conversations seem to sometimes assume that I won't be doing my work or listening to their instructions, which is always funny in the moment. When they ask how many times I've done X and I tell them the equivalent of none, you told me not to. That said, I've certainly been exploring the contours of what I can and can't do with my current diet without risking blood pressure spikes. So I'm not a perfect patient, but I do try. Next questions are family oriented. So these are really from Mrs. Hoeg. I'd like to know how your family has been coping with this. I'm interested in the social and psychological aspects concerning the family as a whole. And how are you and the family doing?
I keep seeing this question pop up and my reaction is always, oh yeah, we're fine. It's great. But we're not. We've been through a big thing. I think that I can say that I think we will be okay. There is still healing and uncertainty about the future is a big one. And certainly for my oldest, who's a real cerebral individual, and has had some medical training, and I think she kind of really understood what was happening here. I think this was very hard for her, and there were other things too. It wasn't just that something happened to you, right? But that you and I effectively were gone for a month and a half, and while there were people here to take care of them, it wasn't mom and dad. Mom and dad weren't home.
Yeah, it was real weird.
Yeah, I think there's a lot, and there's a lot of emotions, and we're still in it, right? So we're still working through what this life looks like, and it changes every couple weeks as you make advancements or uncover other things you want to work on. And so it's never the same, and our schedule isn't the same from week to week. So even that is just like a small thing that's very stressful, and we've kind of all had to be really flexible and adaptable, and that's not easy. So I think, my best recommendation to anyone in this situation is that you probably need mental health help. There we go. You have to take care of your mental health, and you probably need a professional for it. Team Hoeg is awesome. So I think we're going to be okay, but we're still working through a lot of it. And it is so kind that all of you ask about the kids and how the kids are doing. And that is so lovely, and of course speaks to my heart. And it's so sweet of you to think of them when you're sending cards or gifts. Even who doesn't love mail? And that has been
they love getting the mail. That's the truth.
Oh my goodness, they love it. And even if the package isn't addressed to them, they help open everything, and they have had a great time with that. So even that little act by our community was a way to care for our whole family, right? Not just you and not just me, but even the kids appreciated being able to open something. And sometimes there was something in there for them, or sometimes there wasn't, and they stole it anyway. But either way, that was a beautiful thing. So I think we're doing okay. I was actually reflecting on this question yesterday and was thinking about, I feel a lot closer to your family, Rick. I feel, we're all kind of spread out. Not everybody lives in Michigan. And I feel a lot closer to all of them as they came together to help with this. And I think that's been a beautiful thing. And I want to say too, we don't talk about your mom enough. She had to deal with a family thing out of state in the middle of this. And so she didn't come to the hospital every day, but she was there every day that she was here. She was there. Mm-hmm. So, Mama Hoeg gets some credit too, I think.
And she wrote a letter every day she was gone.
She wrote a letter every day she was gone. And so I feel more connected to your family. And I think that's been great. And certainly you and I are closer than ever, I think. And
yeah, I agree.
That's been pretty special.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And the only thing I would add to it is that I think that my wife tends to self-deprecate a little bit. She's an excellent role model for dealing with these kinds of emergency situations for my daughters. And I try to be as good of a role model myself, which I'm not as good at, but we're trying to do that. And the girls, to their credit, have really been trooping along with very little issue because of what I would say is my wife's good role modeling of how to behave in these kinds of situations.
Well, that's nice of you to say. I hadn't thought about that.
Well, I think it's the truth. I'm not just gilding the lily.
Huh.
Please share the ways that you look beyond the immediate frustration you are facing. When the challenge in front of you is hard and the challenge after that is harder, what is your strategy to continue to fight? When everything is so much harder than it was before, what do you say to yourself to keep going? For the most part, I've been blessed in disposition to not really have to think about it as doing harder and harder things, even as the therapies definitely get harder and harder. So my strategy is really the Gandalf strategy we talked about before. All I can do is the best I can. Now, that does take a fair amount of trust in your therapists and therapies that they're moving you in the right direction. Thankfully, I've always been very fortunate from the amount of return or healing that my work in therapy has realized. There's nothing quite like your hand returning to function or waking up to find your shoulder without pain for the first time in months to motivate you and add to that trust. I just never viewed it as anything but putting my head down and doing the work, and that's the best I can offer here. What are your unexpected gratitudes in the aftermath of all this, and do you feel you are being nudged to make any changes in your path? I think that you can hear some of the gratitudes that both me and my wife have for just being grateful about what we've been blessed with. I've definitely become closer with my loved ones, and I've been given a chance to pause and reflect on what my life is and what I want it to be. I feel like I got a deathbed's worth of perspective with thankfully little of the consequence that usually comes from having that seat. I was definitely more than nudged to try to take stock of that perspective during this whole process. What was helpful versus unhelpful for my medical team, my wife and kids, and my community? You've seen this slide before, but I'd like to cover all of the bases here as we have throughout this series. As for support, my medical team continues to be fabulous and more than willing each day, we're now on 3 to 4 months, remember, to meet me where I live, to consider my desires to walk, jog, and to run, to play games, and to make videos. My wife has been with me every freaking step of the way and has listened to my complaints and dreams for hours of driving and in more waiting rooms than I can count. She's almost never complained about the unfair hand I dealt to her, no pun intended, and the community keeps sending things of absolute beauty and care. You all are so, so talented, and I will never be worthy of your creations, but you surely motivate me to keep trying every single day. How did you feel during this stage? We talked about it a little bit, but this has been a very tough stage for a number of reasons. First, as I mentioned, comparing your life before to your life now is simply a much easier trap to fall into at home. Second, I'm also now mixing rehab life with attempts to get back to quote-unquote normal. This crossing of multiple jobs at once really wears me out, and on bad days I can feel guilty about being worn out and not doing more. Finally, post-stroke, the job, whether legal or making videos, is simply harder. Harder to prepare, harder to focus on, harder to execute. On the video front, I can't quite make videos in the same way I used to, which you might have seen on Twitter. And that has proven to be a difficult thing for me to deal with at certain points in my day. How has this slow process affected your mental health, and what do you do to keep your morale and mental attitude positive? How do I stay positive? Well, I fail regularly. But for the most part, Mrs. Hoeg bears the brunt of it. I just try to be thankful of what I have and not resentful of what I've lost, but some days are better than others, to be sure.
I disagree that you fail regularly. You fail.
I'm not positive all the time, honey. That's certainly the truth.
I know, but I think you fail intermittently. I mean, yes, you have days and you have moments, and when you bump up against something that's more challenging than it used to be, that is like a frustration. But you keep going, and I think that's because that's how you've approached everything in your life, with a I think I can do that kind of attitude. Even I think I can make YouTube videos and have a channel, and I told you I thought that was crazy, and I am so wrong. And never happier to be wrong. And you looked at a thing and said, I think I can do that. And because you have lived your life so much like that, I think even when you're in this moment, the toughest, most challenging thing you've ever done, your brain has naturally trained itself to say, but I think I can get through this. So I don't know.
Well, I appreciate it. I try to stay positive. I try to stay focused. And I think we've had a lot of successes there.
Yeah.
I'm answering the question as honestly as I can, which is that I'm definitely not always positive.
That's true.
What are your plans and next steps to returning to your day job? Are you planning on returning to lawyering full-time or part-time? What are my plans? To be honest, it's to be determined. Honestly, things are shifting so fast, I kind of have to avoid making huge forged in iron plans, both because I want to think I can get better from here and because I don't want to assume that I will simply return to quote unquote normal. My intent is to return to lawyering at something like a normal business schedule and to do videos on the channel at a reduced cadence. You may have already seen that I've announced the return of Lawyers and Dragons on the 27th. There it is, May 27th. That's the great David putting graphics together for us as he does, our GM. If you haven't seen Lawyers and Dragons, check it out. And there may even be a bit of a reunion of Lawyers and Dragons on the Fundraiser stream on the 6th, with a little luck. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a bit nervous about running the L&D stream and being in character for 2 hours at a time. Everything I do now, which I think I can do easily or that I have done in the past, is met with the realities of the situation when I go to try to do it, whether it's making videos like this one or making streams like that one. So hopefully it'll be great. I'm looking forward to it. I love Lawyers and Dragons. I love hanging out with everybody involved in that process. I love participating in that, and I love interacting with the community on a show like that one. But I'm definitely anxious about what that will look like in the moment that it actually happens. Do you think the stroke has changed your personality? If so, how? Well, I'm told I have reduced inhibitions and perhaps a slight increase in impulsiveness. I'm also significantly more emotional than I was before, which we've discussed, but I do try to share that emotion with my wife more than I used to. Is there anything else you're seeing that I need to know about in terms of change of personality, honey?
I think there are some things that only I would notice.
Okay.
Right? Like it's not because I've known you for 20 plus
longer
years.
Than we have to admit to.
Yeah, a long time. I think there are some things that only I would notice. I think, I think people should know that Rick Hoeg is not normally a person who shares this much of his personal life or his internal thought process, even with me. So to make this video and share these things so openly and so frankly is I think one of the things that's different about you.
Well, in defense of my own personality, all of this makes me massively uncomfortable. I just think it's a very good thing to put out there.
Well, it's weird for me too, because I'm like, whoa, I'm not used to dealing with this version of Rick Hoeg. So I feel that too, honey. I still like you.
Well, that's good.
I mean, you're still great. So that hasn't changed.
And the last question on this page, I'd like to know how you're dealing with not working. You can probably tell from this 8-part video series made during rehabilitation that I'm not great at sitting on my hands. The hardest part is definitely the financial one, as the loss of a quarter plus of income becomes combined with more medical bills than I've ever seen. As one of my primary drives is providing for family, it does get hard to sometimes think that I'm not doing that so well. This can sometimes drive my down days if I let it, so I try to focus on the positives of getting more time with that family, as well as a chance to simply heal, that I know is unique. Before you had the stroke, what were the decisions throughout life that incrementally helped build character, that tipped the scale towards finding the strength to keep moving forward after the stroke? I'd love to tell you that I've been making good life choices throughout that led to these outcomes, but I think if I broke this down, I think the most impactful is that I married well, as you can tell. Marriage is about so much more than attraction or even sex, and I've never been more aware of that one than when my wife became every Marvel hero wrapped up into one during this entire crisis event. I know I loved her before this, she's the mother of my children, but I don't think even I knew how much we loved each other. If you can find that, hang on to it. It may just save your life. Second, I think you are probably aware that attorneys are risk-averse by nature. Our job is to analyze laws, documents, and situations to determine the ways that they might potentially hurt our clients and hopefully to prevent them. But that doesn't always hold. Sometimes the bad things just hit and you have to move forward. I think that perspective has helped massively throughout all of this. Almost every day I was able to face with a kind of, okay, then now we do this. That can be very comforting both in the moment and after. I also quite firmly believe that faith was a part of the equation. You may have heard me say this before, filtered through pop culture as my perspective so often is. One of my favorite songs is One Day More from the Broadway musical Les Miserables. Towards the end of that song, all the disparate verses come together to sing shout, "Tomorrow we'll discover what our God in heaven has in store." And I sung that in the hospital, and that helped me throughout. That doesn't work out so well for the cast of Les Mis, but there's a kind of serenity in Gandalf once again, knowing that all you can do is the best you can do with the time that you've been given. I don't want to regret not being my absolute best to recover, and so I don't. But will, faith, and love is only part of the equation. As I said to one of my therapists, I will give you the energy, but I need to know where to direct it. And so they directed me. Now with your help, I want to direct some of that energy back to them. So please come join me on the 6th for our fundraiser at 10 a.m. Eastern. Why, there might even be some stream-exclusive goodies to grab with the proceeds going to the hospitals. Isn't that right, Mrs. Hoeg?
Yes, and I want to say thank you to our designer, Chris, for coming to me with this idea and making some great stuff. So we're going to have some merch that will be available starting on Saturday. I'm so excited. There'll be some shirts, there'll be some sweatshirts. I have to add some more things in there still, but for right now, this is the placeholder spot. You can see the tab at the top says Charity Fundraiser. All of the profits from anything sold listed under Charity Fundraiser will be split between the two hospitals. I am really, really excited about this part of things. I think it's going to be just so great to bring everyone together and have lots of different ways to give. So please check that out. We'll share the link on the 6th. I think, Rick, I didn't talk to you about this, but I think it should just be anything that's sold from that tab for the weekend. And then Sunday night, we can tally up what that total is.
This is real-time planning here, folks. But yeah, I think we want to make sure as much as possible gets to the hospitals.
Absolutely. So that but I don't want to have to end up tracking it for months and months. So this weekend only, that stuff will be available and the profits will go to the hospital. And again, thank you, Chris. It was a great idea. Thank you for reaching out to me. We have such a great community. We have such great people that you work with that have been so wonderful. And I'm excited about this part of it.
Oh, I think it's going to be great. And those links will be up when we're doing the fundraiser on Saturday. We're very, very excited about it. And we really hope you'll make it because this whole series has been something that we've been interested in doing and focused on really since January. And I wanted to culminate with some real support going to the places that helped save my life. So thank you all for considering it. Thank you for being a part of this series. And that goes for you too, Mrs. Hoeg Law. Thank you so much for being on all these episodes and helping me organize this entire series throughout.
You bet. I want to thank your community for giving us the opportunity to do this. Like just even, having this channel and having people to watch and listen, and it wouldn't be possible without all of them. And so thank you so much. I know this was important to you, Rick, not just because your story is important and your story can help people, but I also know this was kind of like another piece of your rehab was put this together and make this happen. And can you do it? So y'all are helping with therapy.
Yeah, there's no question. I wanted to get this information out there, but I also wanted to be able to make this series. And I've been thinking about it for months. So just going through this whole process and having the kind of comments and community involvement that we've had as part of this series has been so helpful to me and believing I can do these things still and put these things together. And I'm really hopeful that the hospitals just have a great day on Saturday. Do drop in. We're going to have a bunch of people that you might recognize and some that you might not. So come on, visit. Thank you so much for all the questions, for all the responses to that post I put up that have been a part of this series and an important part. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate everyone that has done everything for me in the past few months. I cannot thank everybody properly enough. So thank you. And I hopefully will see you on Saturday. Thank you so much for watching all of this series and being a part of it with me. I really, really appreciate it. See you then.
Virtual Legality is a YouTube video series with audio podcast versions presented as commentary and for education and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute legal advice and does not create an attorney-client relationship. If you have legal questions about the topics discussed, please consult your own legal counsel.